Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Living Room Music Appreciation, sponsored by the Cultural Arts Department at North Shore Community College. Let me get my coffee here. Hope everybody's doing okay. We're going to continue with serialism today in a couple of videos. This will probably take a couple of videos, so I'll link those to the channel. Quite a bit different than expressionism and impressionism and neoclassicism in that serialism is about technique. So we talked about the isms as ideologies, that they're not just techniques, they're ideologies. Serialism is a technique. So I know it's a little confusing here, and I realize I'm contradicting myself saying that these isms are ideologies. Serialism, and we'll see how it's used with in tandem with neoclassicism as well as romanticism. But serialism is a technique. It's called the 12-tone method. It was devised by Schoenberg about 1923. He invites his friends over to his apartment or his house in Vienna, and he unveils this new plan. And it's a plan that it's quite mathematical, or it can be mathematical, very regimented. And it's a way to extend atonality, to make atonal composition to extend its power. So you can write longer pieces. The problem with expressionism is that the pieces tended to be quite short. Now, not all serialistic pieces are huge. Some are quite short as well. But it's a way of extending the line so you won't repeat a pitch. So, and it's a very intricate method on how to do this. But you essentially take the 12th pitch to the chromatic scale. So imagine, I should put a piano keyboard on here. But imagine a piano keyboard. You got black keys and white keys. If you play all those keys within an octave, you'll get 12 pitches. So the goal is you put those 12 pitches in any order you want. Any order you want. And you can't repeat a pitch until you've been through the series. Hence the term serialism, the series. And you can do all kinds of things with that. You have what's called a row. So once you have your pitches, you have a row, and then you can't repeat a pitch till you've been through the row. And you can play the row backwards. You can invert it so the intervals go a different direction from what the original row does, and you can play that backwards. So you get at least 4 different basic combinations of a row, and then you can transpose it, and you can do all these wonderful things. It's like a matrix when you learn this, and I learned it in undergraduate theory. You have this matrix. It looks like a Sudoku puzzle. Sudoku puzzle. I'm sorry, and then you fill out the rows, and then you transpose them, and you get this nice little organized matrix. So you can start from any point and follow the pattern. I'm not a composer. I never tried composing anything. I dabbled, but I stink. I'm terrible. No ideas. But I was sort of fascinated with the mechanics of this system. It's actually fairly difficult to compose in this system. It seems like it's easy. It seems like it's running a computer program. You just program the piece and there you go. But you still have choices in instrumentation. You have choices in register. You have choices in all kinds of things. Tone color. It can be a very complex program. And it's, one professor say it's actually one of the more difficult techniques to compose in because to get something musical out of it. Yeah, using the term musical, which we can maybe digest what that means. When we get post-World War II, serialism becomes the language of academic composition. So, and it's really prevalent in the 50s with experimentalists. They kind of take it and run with it. It's still used. It's still around, although I think academic composers are probably getting away from this. And we'll talk about how the academic side of composition became so different from sort of populist composition. If we deal with classical music, and we'll talk about this kind of divide that happens. And people blame serialism, but they blame Schoenberg for this. They blame the music becoming too complicated, virtually unlistenable. It's not everybody's favorite style of music. If you haven't listened to some of the recordings on the YouTube channel, you might get a sense that it's not very tuneful. It seems very random. It's not random. That's the thing. It's not random at all, but it has that sensation. So people tend to not gravitate to this stuff. I'm going to talk about a couple pieces that I think are pretty interesting here. Interesting use of serialism in various capacities, but it is this so-called 12-tone system. So, Schoenberg. Like I said, he's not a dyed-in-the-wool, or at least not a total revolutionary. He looks to the past quite often. And so here's where you can mix serialism with neoclassicism. We talk about neoclassicism when you're resurrecting older forms. That it's not just a technique, it was also an ideology. Here you can do it, here Schoenberg does it with serialism. So one of his first serial pieces is the Suite for Piano, Opus 25. I'll post that to the YouTube channel. And if you look at the movement structures here, they're classical or even older. Preludium is a prelude. We had a prelude with Suite Bergamasque by Debussy, just an introductory piece. Gavotte is a Baroque dance. It's a French dance. Musette is not a dance, but it's music imitating a kind of bagpipe. It's like a small little miniature bagpipe, the musette. Intermezzo we had with Brahms, just an intermediary movement. Minuet, you might be familiar with. If you remember Haydn, we talked about Haydn's symphonies and the string quartet. I think we talked about the string quartet. The Emperor Quartet. The minuet, this dance, popular in Vienna in the 18th century and elsewhere. And then the jig, it's a French dance in triple meter, very quick. So you have these old forms, you're bringing them back, and then it's a basis for your experimentation. So that's why some people, some historians they'll kind of blend this kind of practice of serialism with neoclassicism and call it period modernism because you're looking to the past for inspiration. Again, that's kind of the technique, emphasis on the technique, but some of these things are ideologies. So here's an example where things can be both. I realize it can be a little confusing. Art isn't as simple as mathematics, or as straightforward as math. I shouldn't say mathematics aren't simple either, but they aren't as straightforward as mathematics. There's not one answer. Sometimes you get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different answers. It can be multiple things. I've had a couple of you email me about, I didn't understand, this combination. Fair question, but in history and the way people behave, and certainly in the cultural arts, things can have more than one answer. So it's easy to get confused. So here you have serialism and this period modernism combination. So have a listen to that. You might notice some techniques here. Some of these are maybe a little abstract, others not so much, but I'll talk about pointillism first. Pointillism is when you vary the register. So you'll take a melody and you'll put maybe one note up high, then one note low, and one note in the middle. So it'll jump around, making it almost unintelligible. So it's called pointillism. It gets its name from the visual arts, where you'll have just points. You'll take your brush and just have various points. Pointillism in music, similar kind of thing. So it's a way of distorting the melody. And so Schoenberg and some of his students did this very well, to distort traditional notions of melody. So you get this kind of jumping around. It's very odd sounding. Chromatic saturation is a little more of a theoretical idea. Sometimes this is called a combinatoriality. So what you'll do is if you have your row, your 12 pitches, you split it in half, you have 6. So you'll play 6 pitches. Then you'll take another row from another transposition, and you'll get the other 6 pitches of the chromatic scale from a different row, and then so you'll have this chromatic turnover within a short time frame. Now you can think, well, you couldn't do that with just the row. You could do that too. But chromatic saturation, this combinatoriality, it's an interesting theoretical concept where you'll take 2 different rows and combine the half of the pitches with another half of the pitches that are the different chromatic stream, and you'll get all 12 pitches really quick. So that's kind of thing that Schoenberg experiments with. Again, more of a theoretical concept. I had a professor in graduate school who's very good at listening to serial music, and he could hear these things. I have to look at the score. I have to look at what's happening. I mean, it just, at some point, your good listening skills break down, and I haven't spent enough time with this music, listening to it intently, to sort of get the technical aspect. I need to look at it. Well, I'm a historian. I need to look at the evidence or look at it. Visual learner, I guess. Chromatic saturation is a theoretical idea. Klangfarben melody is a tone color melody. So think of pointillism, but with instruments. So you'll have one note of a melody with one instrument, another note with another note with yet another, and so you'll have this just transformation of timbre within a melodic framework. So this is a way of distorting tradition as well. Usually you'll have the melody in the strings or the voice or somewhere, or the upper keys of the piano. If you sort of do this with instruments, you end up with this very interesting kind of collage of sound within a melody. So that's Klangfarben melody, a nice German word, tone color melody. Schoenberg teaches this technique for pretty much the rest of his life. He is a professor in a couple of places in California. He ends up at USC, University of Southern California, and UCLA. So he teaches this technique and inspired a lot of Hollywood composers. So John Williams, I don't believe, had Schoenberg. He had Maria Castelnuovo Tedesco, who was Italian. I don't think Castelnuovo Tedesco was more of a romantic. I don't recall if he experimented with 12-tone music, but that was one of John Williams's teachers in California. So Castelnuovo Tedesco was in California, but Schoenberg was responsible for teaching a lot of Hollywood composers, as well as Stravinsky. You remember, Stravinsky was living in California at the same time. And so Schoenberg, when he's in Vienna, teaches this technique to several students. Two of them I'm going to talk about, Alban Berg and Anton Webern. Collectively, these three are known as a second Viennese school, although there are more than just these three. These are sort of the prime three you see in the music history textbooks, music appreciation textbooks maybe. History textbooks would be a little more involved. But Schoenberg, Alban Berg, and Anton Webern, all working with the 12-tone system in some shape or capacity. I'm not going to be able to finish Berg maybe entirely. I'll talk about it here. Here's Alban Berg, 1885 to 1935. Very much interested in combining romantic elements with serialism. So where Schoenberg is sort of combining classical elements, in some cases, with serialism, Berg is sometimes referred to as a romantic at heart. He was somewhat sentimental. He composed one of his, I didn't have this professor, but he came to UF when I was just finishing up, talking about how he wrote Lulu, I believe it was Lulu, or the Violin Concerto, I don't remember which one, with the same pen that Wagner used to write Tristan and Isolde. So this kind of romantic symbolism doesn't make him a romantic if he used a pen, but he had this kind of interest in Wagner. He's quite famous for writing several operas, some of them expressionistic, like Wojciech. It's about a man who commits murder, kills his wife, and goes insane and drowns himself. Got this expressionistic story, as well as Lulu. And Lulu is his last opera, and it's quite a convoluted tale about a woman who has various lovers, and she ends up a prostitute at one point, and one of her lovers, unfortunately, ends up being Jack the Ripper, who murders her. So Lulu is very interesting. That's kind of it in a nutshell. I apologize to those who might be watching this. Not in the class. I'm screwing this up. It's a little more involved than this, but Lulu is a 12-tone opera by Berg. I've seen it. It's quite interesting. Matt, I think it's done. Matt has done it. I want to talk about the Violin Concerto here briefly. See if I can finish this up in a couple seconds. The tone row's fashion, the way he fashions a tone row has a strong tonal undercurrent. So he's playing with tonal elements, which means that one pitch is more important than others, and as well as atonal elements. So extending tonality into atonality. The concerto does quote a snippet from one of J.S. Bach's chorale, Es ist genug, it is enough. At the very end, it's quoted in the middle as well. So I'm going to talk more about the Violin Concerto in a couple seconds here. I'm running out of time, so bear with me. See you in a few.